Right. Good morning, gang. Welcome. It is the 2nd of March 2022, and this is today's SitRep. So we've been seeing a lot of stuff happen around the world again. I'll just dim that down for the YouTube people because I'd hate for you to not be able to see this, be blinded by that light. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened overnight again around the world, some interesting things, and I've been monitoring stuff this morning as well. A little bit slower this morning. Me, not the news cycle. News cycle's still pumping. It's just me who's slow this morning. So yeah, we're going to talk about some Ukraine stuff as always, and fallout that's going to have. We'll come to the local stuff, so the floods and what's happening up in Taiwan, or might be happening in Taiwan. And then I'm going to talk about financial and cyber, and I'll finish off with a bit of Q&A because I threw it out there, and I'll continue to do that. I'll pull out little Q&As sometime during the day and try and answer those questions in the next SitRep that I do, whenever that is. But if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them into the little chat box down here on Instagram, or obviously in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. All right, it's currently 8:53 Australian Eastern Standard Time with a little bit of daylight savings sprinkled on top, so you can figure that one out. I'm 40 and I haven't figured out daylight savings time yet, so good luck to you. All right, Ukraine. As I said a couple of days ago, my theory on what was going on with Ukraine, which, I mean, it's not my theory, it's to me, it's pretty obvious that we saw them pulling out, or the Russians pull back a little bit. That's just an operational pause where they're going to step back. Everyone was saying, maybe Ukraine's won, maybe the Russians are getting beaten back. I don't know if the Russians are getting beaten back, to be honest. I think they're playing out what they're meant to be playing out. It might not be going as expediently as they thought it might be, but what I thought might happen next was airstrikes, bombings, missile attacks, and what has happened is airstrikes, bombings, and missile attacks. So they've started quite heavily shelling a lot of the cities there, and that's all over the news. You can watch that in real time almost on a lot of the channels that I'm on, at least. That's all happening. Yeah, quite large attacks. Two of them more the larger ones was on a government building in Kyiv and TV towers in Kiev. So apparently the television broadcast ability has been knocked out within Kiev, at least temporarily, or disrupted. So that's interesting. That's quite common, though, within war zones to see signal towers and things like that attacked, disruption of information. And obviously this war in particular, and as I've been saying, I believe like wars that we're stepping into now are going to be based more around information wars than actual physical wars or hybrid wars. So we're going to see the physical element to them still, but much more the cyber element and the information element is going to take a huge bearing into battle spaces that we're looking at in the future. Russia did put a warning out to Ukrainians that they should flee, and that has caused a lot of panic by all accounts that I'm seeing within Kiev, at least, that they're having a huge amount of people flee the city right now. Too many people to actually get out. There's some pretty horrific photos and videos coming out of like the last train out of Ukraine. It's definitely pumped up from Western sources there, but yeah, a lot of people not maybe being able to get out of the city. And again, my recommendation is if you can see problems on the horizon, leave early. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Try and get out to a safer place earlier. So, if you put yourself in this sort of situation, you're in a major city, and, I'm always recommending that you don't be in a major city at the best of times. But with this, you're in a major city. It looks like something's going to break out. Start to look at more rural locations, or start to look at locating yourself outside of the country or out of the problem area. So a huge amount of refugees pouring towards those borders, especially Poland, Romania, Moldova, on the eastern side of Ukraine. And So none of what I'm about to say isn't being reported. What we are actually getting reports there is I've seen one story that's been picked up by several news sources about a German who drove from Germany to pick up a couple of refugees and drive them and house them in their house, which is great. That's fantastic and good on them. But that's sort of like the good news story that's being circulated. Like, look, Europe is standing up. Here's the other side of it, and this next part might be a bit hard to hear, as in like take in. This is definitely some sort of information that can weigh heavy on people. So just take that as a bit of a warning. But this is from I've got a couple of sources who are over there, and one in particular who I trust a lot. And this person is very, very savvy. They understand what's going on. They're well linked in. Basically, what they're seeing on the ground there is the incursion now of a lot of criminal elements, which is inevitable. Whenever you've got people who are in desperate need, you have people who prey on them. You've got these predators out there that are going to do it, and that is all over the world. I've seen that absolutely everywhere across the world, and it's not related to what kind of people they are, what race, creed, gender, anything like that. There's predators out there, and they always look for the weak and work on them. So we're seeing that. We're seeing families are actually being separated at the border. So we're seeing a level of corruption within maybe the border forces there, where they're saying, okay, yep, the women and children can come, but the men, no, you can't come. And so unless people can facilitate their way through there, i.e. have cash on them, the men are going like, well, yep, I need to get my family out of here, and are doing what they see is the right thing, and putting their family out into these other countries. And they're particularly being targeted there. The women and children are being targeted. So, we've got a lot of things happening there. One of the big ones is theft. So criminals picking up people, being, oh yeah, we're the good Samaritans here, picking up these refugees, driving them into the countryside, and then basically stealing everything off them and dumping them there in the middle of nowhere. And it's easy for us to sit here and go like, wow, that's the most horrible thing that could ever happen. But this is so common within any disaster or war zone. Like I said, I've seen it everywhere. It happened in Hurricane Katrina. It was quite well reported there, but it's happened everywhere. I've seen it in Syria. I've seen it in Iraq. I've seen it in Afghanistan. I've seen it Guatemala, Venezuela, all these areas in the world. Whenever there's some sort of emergency, people like these what I think of as evil predators come out to play, and they start doing what they do. So, apparently we're seeing that happen around those borders of those refugees. So, anytime there's a refugee situation going on, it's straight up a humanitarian crisis. And this is the sort of thing that makes my blood boil, and it's the sort of thing that I wish like I could get on a plane tomorrow and go over there and try and help out that situation there in particular, because that's innocent civilians who are just trying to get away from a conflict zone. And I think people should do that. If you're not prepared to be a combatant, which most people shouldn't be, then you should be allowed to get out of that situation. And they're being hindered and at their worst. Like this is people. Imagine yourself right now that you've been dislocated from your home, you've left everything behind, you have very little possessions or anything on you. And at that point, when you've lost almost everything, then somebody takes the last things that you have from you. So horrible situation, horrible what's happening to the women and children there. And I don't know if we're going to start seeing that in the news lately, but I've scoured the major news sites and haven't seen anything about any of these sorts of attacks. They want to kind of paint a picture, I guess, of like Europe's united and we're standing against Russia. There's bad people everywhere. So, not good stuff. Russia's come out and said that they are reacting to talks about Ukraine wanting to go nuclear, as in rearm themselves with nuclear weapons. So that's been a bit of a talk. The whole nuke word's been bandied around a little bit. Belarus has said they want to become a nuclear state. Ukraine's saying that they want to become a nuclear state again. To a certain extent, they're battling a nuclear state, and they have agreed that they're not going to be a nuclear state years ago. So that means they've got a reliance on other nuclear states. And that's kind of a shit situation for them where they're kind of like, well, we can't actually defend ourselves against one of these threats. And consideration there too that Putin has put their nuclear assets on high alert now. Also, that's not the end of the world. He has done that many times before. He did it in 2014 with Crimea thing. So it's kind of par for the course that he's doing that. So if you're reading that in the news, and I am seeing a lot of that sort of stuff in the news, you put on even a major news site and there's a picture of a nuclear explosion on there and you're like, whoa, hang on, what's going on here? Putin is known to do that, to put those forces on high alert. So don't freak out, but it's something. Ukraine has asked to be put into the EU. The EU has responded, apparently. Now, this is, as of yet, unconfirmed from EU, but there's a few reports, or one of the reports was RT, so I'll put the caveat on that, which is Russian propaganda, that EU is pushing to is actually going, yep, we will expedite that process and get you into the EU. So obviously that has longer big-term effects if Ukraine's going to be pulled into the EU, because then it's like, well, now the EU is being attacked, not just Ukraine. Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on there, and a lot of financial stuff that's happening with fallout with that, but I'll leave that till after, when I get onto more the financial information a little bit later on. I'll switch it to here in Australia. So obviously we've been having horrific floods here, which have been pretty bad. My area has just started to get lashed by rain, and the forecast is more rain for the next week, heavy doses. So there's been minor flooding and, route or bridge outages within my area, which is almost par for the course for the last 2 years where we've been having flood events like this. But we'll see what happens, because there's a lot more expected. Sydney, now it's your turn. According to the weather report, Sydney's going to get lashed by a lot of rain. So for those who don't know, I usually talk, because I'm talking to an Australian audience here, but I do understand that I do have some people from other places, especially the US, on YouTube, who are looking. Up north, one of the northernmost capital, I guess, is Brisbane, and that got smashed with floods. A lot of horrific flooding going on there. Then it moved to northern New South Wales, just below that. So now it's creeping down, and it's hitting Central Coast and about to hit Sydney today, which is further down. And then I'm further down in southern New South Wales. So we're feeling the rain effects here as well. But Sydney is about to get inundated with rain. So again, if you're living in and around that area, please don't drive through flooded waterways. Don't drive through flood water. Do not try and cross flood water unless you are extremely competent, that you have people backing you up, that you have flotation devices on you. And if you're in a car that's less than capable, i.e. not four-wheel drive, not lifted, and not with a snorkel on it, then do not attempt to cross floodwaters. Try and stay safe, stay dry if you can. If flooding is predicted in your area, get out early and get all your goods. Like the things I've been recommending to people, I've been talking to friends up in northern New South Wales over the past 48 hours about how to deal with floods. Act as though your house or your premise or whatever you're in is going to flood, and deal with that accordingly. Worst case scenario, you've moved everything else. You've moved things around in your house. You've done like little fortifications and things like that that you now have to pull down. Okay, big deal. Rather than all your stuff be destroyed. So act as though it's going to hit, and try and stay safe out there if you're in any of these areas that are about to be hit. Okay, up into the South China Sea, Taiwan. That's been a little bit quiet due to, I think, the focus being on Ukraine. And there hasn't been anything specific to incite any stories, except that the US just sent a delegation there of ex-defense generals to Taiwan, which, is interesting timing to be sending that there, just to help them, I guess, fortify themselves. And the response from China apparently is furious. They are utterly furious. So those who don't know what the situation is there, China pretty much just says to the world, look, Taiwan's ours. It's always been ours and it always will be ours. that's the People's Republic of China, because Taiwan is actually called the Republic of China. Long story, the history of it, but essentially two separate states that have come out of there. So China's been making moves to kind of reclaim Taiwan, and US is now starting to send something down there, and that's not made them particularly happy down there. So again, just watch that space. Through other sources that I have that are, sources that I not really can talk about, and there's not, solid information, but stuff is happening. That's about the limit of what I'm willing to say there. Things are happening. Everyone's got their eyes on there. Well, everyone defense-wise has got their eyes on there. So watch that space. All right. I'll get into financial/cyber sort of stuff that's happening now. Overnight, YouTube, Google, or Meta, which is the new Facebook. I'm always probably going to call that Facebook, Meta. They've blocked Russian sources, Russian news channels. So RT probably being the big one, being blocked there and taken off their media or their platforms. So they've been deplatformed. And I have noticed that the RT channel on Telegram is going hard. It's going heavy. It feels like that's maybe one of their last areas where they can get out information. So they're doing it. And I've spoken on this before, like RT is clearly Russian sided information. And I still don't think that that's a reason to block them and take them away. Or maybe just education put out around it. I read it, and I read this as Russian propaganda machine. It's still handy information, I think. So blocking it, okay. That's one way to do things, but not sure if it's the right way. However, RT did actually say themselves this morning that YouTube has reopened. I haven't checked them on YouTube. I don't follow them on YouTube or anything like that because I don't want to mess up my YouTube algorithm. But yeah, they may be back on there. So I'm yet to check that. Financial stuff. So obviously these sanctions are starting to set in. That's having big effects on the markets. A lot of people, financial side, are rushing away from anything Russian. Like they're rushing from Russia. That's a weird alliteration, but the problem with that being is that, in case you don't know, places like London, which is a big financial market, and a lot of US interests are very interlinked with Russia, with Russian money, to the point where you could look at it and go, they're almost addicted to places like that. So, that's causing a little bit of difficulties and a little bit of blowback within other markets. And Russia at the moment is sort of holding on like with a death grip to what they've got. And they're, I think, sitting there waiting and looking at what the fallout's going to be for the rest of the world, because there will be some sort of fallout. But Russia, speaking of holding on, they've kind of like just stopped all trade. So they've stopped. Obviously, investors are running for the hills away from Russia. So Russia's put a kibosh on that, stopped it, and holding on to it. So it's actually difficult for investors to get out of Russia, even if they want to right now. Crypto markets, in case you haven't seen it, kind of booming at the moment, going through the roof. That's probably because Russia and Russia's money is seeing that they're being restricted. The ruble is plummeting. Their markets, when they reopen, will plummet as well. So they're shifting all their money into Bitcoin, which is essentially in this case, a third-party intermediary and a safe haven really for it. So we're seeing a lot of money being pumped into the crypto market from Russian sources, as Russia runs away from the ruble, runs away from these sanctions and into crypto markets. So the fallout from that is when Western, well, my sort of prediction here is Western side will start to look at this and go these sanctions aren't doing exactly what we thought they would. Okay, so they're moving money into crypto. Now we have to hit crypto. So I can see them trying to make moves on crypto. I don't know if that'll work, but being that it's largely can be anonymous, but who knows? We'll see. The other side of house is what China is doing. So China has has released some of their key trading information. Two of those that are of interest to me were buying coal from Russia and buying oil from Iran. So they're obviously strengthening ties there with that country as well. And if you've ever heard me talk about this, that this is probably my grand conspiracy, if I've got a conspiracy, is the what I'm starting to call the PRINC now. So that's Pakistan, Russia, Iran, North Korea, China. I can see these countries forming a loose or sometimes very tight alignment, or even coming into some form of axis, if you will, around anti-Western sort of sentiment. So yeah, if we're sitting there sanctioning Russia, we're essentially plugging holes in a dike and saying no, and we're trying to build the pressure on Russia. And then China's just gone with a huge digger and just dug out a massive hole over there where Russia can release the pressure and get money in and sell their resources again. Yeah, so that's going to make it hard for sanctions to be taken super seriously, I guess, in Russia. All right, I'll just quickly have a look at some of the stock markets as well. So what we're seeing in coming out across the board with the markets overnight, there was a kind of a downward trend in a lot of them. So, and not like we'd been seeing sort of 0.5% here, 1%. We're seeing 1.5% to 3% drops in a lot of the markets around the world. So we're starting to see some fallout. So to give you an indication, FTSE, which is UK, London, that's down 1.7%. The CAC 40 index is down almost 4%. DAX, which is German, down almost 4%. Dow Jones, the US, is down 1.7%. Like down in a lot of markets, not all markets, but down in a lot of the major indicators. Then if we're looking at the commodities, we're seeing corn, wheat, soybeans, all up. So the agriculture, the food stuff, up by a fair bit. So wheat up by 8.24%. That's a lot, obviously. But wheat, this is the sort of thing. Stocks, to a certain extent, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Stock market does what it does. Crypto is imaginary shit. I don't really care too much about that sort of stuff. But I'm looking at things like food, or things that are used to create food, or then the follow-on things that are used in fuel or fuel itself, oil. These things are really going to affect you and me on the ground. So something that goes up, up around 10% overnight, that's a big deal. That's the sort of thing we need to take notice of. Brent crude is up 10%. Whoa, it's up at $1.07 a barrel. That's got to be as high as it's been, I reckon, in 7 or 8 years at least. I'm not sure, but yeah, all oil indicators are up a lot, which is obviously not the best thing. Metal market, again, that's gone back up. So gold spot, we're seeing at 1943, so $1,943 US an ounce for gold, and that's super high. Silver's back up over $25 an ounce. And these things are where money goes. Like, you can use gold and silver as a good indicator of market sentiment. So people are shitting their pants right now. CNN Business put out a thing called the Fear and Greed Index. So fear and greed are kind of the classic two indicators of the market. Are people greedy, so they're going to be buying up and everything's going through the roof, or are people fearful and they're selling off and trying to get out of markets? It's out of 100. So 100 being the most greed, 0 being the most fear. We're currently at 18. So we're pretty much entrenched in extreme fear. In fact, their indicator is anything under 24, that 25, 24 mark is extreme fear. So that's where we are at the moment. Markets are in extreme fear, and you can see, like, if you look at the weekly markets, there's dips like this, and then there's rises, and then bits where they come back down. It's all over the shop. It's very volatile right now, with good reason. So again, markets. The reason that I sort of talk about markets, I think, it's just a big indication of what's happening in the world, and these things are well overdue for something major to happen, as in the crash. All right. Lastly, just a couple of things on some cyber type attacks. This is from Russian sources. They've said that Killnet, which is a hacking group, has taken down Anonymous's site. So Anonymous came out and said they're going to attack Russian sites, and they started doing it yesterday, by all accounts successfully. Now we've had another activist group attack Anonymous. So we're seeing, cyber warfare happening, apparently. Again, this is reporting from RT, though, so take that as Russian propaganda. Another big one that I thought was interesting was a website called Yandex, which is kind of like the Russian equivalent of Uber Eats, I guess. It's a food delivery service. They got attacked and taken down. So, yeah, that's interesting as well to me. Like, whenever we're seeing these sorts of things taken down, it's not necessarily like military or government. We're seeing a lot of civilian casualties in the cyber war as well. And the reason I point this out is, like, I try and tie everything back to how does this affect us? Okay, this is opening the slate, opening the slather for available targets. So now when hackers are looking at it, they go, well, who are we going to attack? Are we going to attack the government? Are we going to attack government websites? Are we going to attack military websites? Are we going to attack infrastructure website? Or are we going to just attack any website that we can get a hold of that is a Western target? And it doesn't matter. So it's kind of opening up this arms race and this quite intense total cyber war situation, which I think is a bit disturbing. So again, like, protect your stuff. Make sure you're safe on the internet. Try not to put too much of your own personal information out there. Use a VPN. Limit the sites that you're using, and update your apps on your phone. Update your OS and update your apps regularly. That's one of the easiest ways you can make yourself, a huge percentage safer, by just keeping your apps up to date. All right. So I threw it out there for questions, and I got a couple back from the Instagrams. So I'll just bring them up. Okay, the first question is, I'm completely out of the loop with the Russia-Ukraine situation. Can you update what started it all? In a nutshell, what started it all? Okay, so what started it all was Russia has been planting seeds for a long time to take back areas of Russia that they consider, some say, what was the USSR, some say the Russian Empire, which predates USSR. But essentially, Putin's been talking about taking back what is part of the Russian Empire, or the, what would you call it, Russia's destiny. I've heard it put out there as well. So there's a deeper meaning to that's going on there. But anyway, that includes places like Ukraine. So we've seen instability in a lot of countries that surround Russia. We're thinking Kazakhstan. We're thinking Georgia. And then in 2014, a section, an island sort of section that's connected to Ukraine down the south, was separated from Ukraine and was, wanted to become kind of like their independent sort of selves. But it was very obvious to anyone watching that it was Russia, and Russia moved in there and essentially took over that area called Crimea. Now, if we look in the eastern part of the country, what we're seeing is two areas, which we know now as the kind of Donbass region, that wanted to secede from and become their own two separate countries from Ukraine. So with maybe a little bit of Russian help, or certainly a little bit of Russian help, they said, yep, we're going to be our own states now. And Russia rushed in and said, ha, these guys are their own sovereign states now. And by the way, Ukraine's fighting them and there's genocide going over there. So we're moving in. So that was their excuse to begin moving in. When they started to do or when they started to rumble that they were going to do that, NATO stepped in and NATO started bolstering their forces in throughout Europe. So that increased what Russia did, and Russia started building forces all around Ukraine, including Belarus, which is a very, very friendly country to Russia. In fact, like you could just essentially think that Belarus is a puppet state or part of Russia. It'd be the easiest way to put it. So they encircled Ukraine, and then when they decided, yep, we're going to move into that Donbass region to help out those independent states as we see it, they didn't just move in there, they moved in everywhere. So from the Crimea, they pushed up, they tried landing sites in a few of the cities down the bottom, and they pushed in from the top from Belarus as well. And they've continued to do that. So they've tried to capture cities, push in. They've taken Chernobyl exclusion zone, which is up the north, and that's just north of Kiev, and they're pushing down into Kiev, pushing in from the south, pushing in from the east. So that's essentially what kicked it off in a nutshell, was most probably Russia wanting to take over Ukraine. If you're following along in the early part, I thought they'd do it piecemeal and just take over that Donbass region and then fortify that and then keep moving region by region throughout Ukraine until they had it all. But they didn't. They went a different tactic and went hard and went fast. That's it in a nutshell. All right, next question is, in the event of widespread power outage, will UHF still work? Yes. There's no, UHF, for those who don't know, it's a radio frequency. So the radio frequency bandwidth is huge, and we use certain parts of it for different things. So you've got way down the bottom where the bandwidth is, the waves are slow but big, I guess would be the best way to put it, and then they get smaller and faster as it goes on until they get really, really, really fast down the end. And we use different chunks of that for different purposes. So our commercial band is like this tiny little sliver here, and then we've got emergency services band, and we've got CB band, and different UHF bands. UHF is kind of a broader term, just meaning ultra high frequencies, but we've got very high frequencies, VHF. We've got high frequency HF down here. So will UHF still work? Yes, like the power is in the unit. So the power is in the actual unit itself. So this here is a UHF radio, and it's preset to certain channels. So I can change channels. There's 80 different channels on this, but I can't change what the frequency is of those channels. They're locked. And that's because if you get on the wrong channel and transmit, that's illegal in most countries in the world. And other radios that you can use, like this one here, is actually like a what we would call a ham radio. So ham radios, you can use a lot more of the bandwidth, but you can get in a lot of trouble. So you need a license to do that. Something like this CB radio or a UHF radio, it's locked. It's not going to cause any problems if I transmit on any of these channels. So the power is in here. The transmitting tower is here, just like a radio. So this is essentially a radio station, for lack of a better word. And when I press that button, I turn it on, put it on a channel, press that button, and I talk, it starts transmitting out. So if the power is out everywhere, it is irrelevant to this. This will still work. And as long as somebody is tuned in to pick up that frequency somewhere, and it's within the area of how much power I can transmit. So there's a few things that can change the distance that it's going to go, but power being one of the main ones. If someone's in that area, they can listen to me. They can receive that. So I transmit and they receive, and then I stop transmitting and I now am in receive mode. So they transmit and I receive. It's nothing to do with our power grid at all. All you need to do is keep this charged up. That's probably the tricky part in that case, but that's where things like solar and generators and stuff like that would come into play. But yeah, Will UHF still work? Yes. A power outage, no matter how widespread it is, the entire Australian grid of power could be disrupted. UHF will still work. It's only if that unit is broken. So in the case of something like, say, a huge EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, which actually destroys electronic equipment when it goes through. It doesn't do anything to humans, just destroys electronic equipment. If that went through, then yep, those things would probably be dead. But so would every other piece of electronic equipment you have. You know, your phones, your lights, your computers, your cars, everything would be dead. And coincidentally, that's one of the effects that happens from a nuclear weapon. So when a nuclear weapon goes boom, it actually puts out an electromagnetic pulse, which doesn't necessarily travel too far unless that nuke is in the stratosphere. So a high altitude nuclear explosion actually has a cascading effect where that EMP builds up, and that could potentially disable every electronic piece of equipment in an entire country. That's one of the more terrifying things. If you want to, there's plenty of channels on YouTube that go through this, but a book, which is actually a novel, it's a story, but it's a cool read because the guy has actually studied the shit out of EMPs. Is a novel called 1 Second After. So if you want to see what EMPs can do to a society, read 1 Second After. Yep. DG0990, that was I think that's your handle. Yep. That was your question. Thanks for that question. That was really good. No, it doesn't need to transmit to a tower. That's the thing. So UHF, it's just the units themselves. You can set up repeater units as well with these, but it's not tied to the grid at all. That's one of the brilliant things about UHF. That's why I always recommend to people, consider getting UHF, consider utilizing that sort of technology, because it is independent of anything. It can be still disrupted, like jamming signals, but it's more difficult to jam it, and it can't be done from like everywhere. So one of the interesting things that's actually in the news that I didn't really talk about a lot has been the use of Western governments, of shutting down things like cellular networks and internet networks for reasons of protests. So that's been happening a lot, happened in the US, in Australia, in Canada. We've been seeing that be utilized by the governments. And that happens all over the world too. It's been happening for years. They've had that ability. But yeah, we're all reliant on using this technology that I'm using right now to talk, and this can be turned off in a second. In fact, yesterday I chucked up in my stories, Tasmania, which is an island off Australia, for those who don't know, a state unto itself, had zero internet for a time period yesterday because they've got two cables that connect their internet to the rest of Australia, and somebody severed one accidentally doing some civil works. And then they realized when they severed that the second one wasn't working. So boom, no internet for an entire state all of a sudden. That's how reliant we are on what is essentially very fragile networks. This is a great backup though. UHF, is kind of independent of that. The only way you can kind of jam that, apart from EMPs destroying it, but jam that is to interrupt that signal with a signal of your own, which is louder. So if I wanted to get on the airways and, say I'm on Gold 104 or something, and I want to get on Gold 104 and disrupt that and have Melbourne listen to me instead of smooth hits or classic hits, I couldn't do that because I don't have enough power. They're pumping out at a power that is orders of magnitude higher than I can get access to. In fact, we're limited at 5 watts for our radios. Anything above that is illegal in Australia for that reason. Well, that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that you can fry your brain if you start going too powerful. But yeah, basically, if you send out a signal which is just like white noise and it overpowers everyone else, it doesn't matter if you're transmitting, all you're going to hear is and all everyone else is going to hear is. So that's one way they could disrupt it, but essentially they have to be in the area doing that and transmitting that at all times. So UHF, great backup. All right, Thanks for those questions. They were great. Really appreciate that. Again, I'm going to try and chuck in a Q&A for the SitReps. So if you've got any questions, just pump them through to me. More than happy to try and answer it. If you get it through to me and I can't do a succinct answer, I will try and research it as well. But apart from that, that's it for today. Thanks for watching again. Thanks for everyone who sends in the messages saying that they appreciate these SitReps. I'll keep doing them as long as somebody's finding value in them. I love doing it, and I'm kind of staring at this information anyway because of my own interest. So I'm happy to give my 2 cents and my summation of them or of the situation that I'm seeing. But again, with all this information, why I'm putting it out there is I want you to try and get this information, look at which way the wind's blowing, try to figure out what we're doing here, how we can best prepare ourselves for potential eventualities that are going to crop up in our world. And that's why I'm saying this sort of stuff that I'm saying. I'm not saying it because I'm like, fearmonger, look, the world's bad. World isn't bad. Things are going to happen. I believe we're going to be going into maybe a little bit of a rougher period than we're used to, but we have been in the softest period that's almost ever existed. So relatively, yeah, it'll be worse. But I want us to be more prepared, and I want us to be able to handle ourselves and keep ourselves and our families and our communities safe. So yeah, apart from that, that's it for today. Stay safe out there. Keep prepping, guys, and Semper Paratus.